I can't do this, Francis. I think I should leave now. It is my mom's birthday today. That's the cold, plain truth.
What?
A banquet is where people just eat and drink to their heart's content, isn't it? It isn't a problem if I'm not here at the banquet, is it?
No. What? Wait a second.
Trouble Busters!
Hi there, I'm Francis. I live together with my husband, Rowan. His parents' home is comparatively close to most other families, and chances to see my mother-in-law, Mrs. Gilpin, are pretty common. Mr. Gilpin, rest his soul, left this world a few years ago, so my mother-in-law currently lives alone at her home. Such is Mrs. Gilpin, and as a person, she's perhaps of a quiet nature. She's always in complete control of her emotions, never letting them seem apparent. She's also rather conservative of these emotions, and it's very rare to see her talking about them. For example, a while ago, when we visited her to greet her and to ask for her blessing to marry her son, "Nice to meet you. My name is Francis." "Oh, it's nice to meet you too." "Oh, okay. Even now, I remember clearly that the conversation of that day never got much more invigorating than that, to be frank. But ever since we started a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship, a life where we were hardly ever being watched over was actually nicer than I thought it would. In any case, she has little interest in other people in general. There was literally zero of that bride bullying we often hear about. And this life was great, pretty much abandoned by Mrs. Gilpin, but it was in the best of ways. To be completely honest here, I was so relieved that I have little to no contact with my in-laws, because then I wouldn't have any problems. One day, Rowan and I were discussing wedding plans. Actually, because of personal inconveniences, we were never able to have a proper wedding when we got married. However, recently, we'd finally become able to spare more money and time, so we decided to have a wedding and a banquet for close friends and family, even though it was quite a bit late, admittedly. Yeah, I don't think we can reserve any other day. This day has to be it, Rowan, or it'll be pretty difficult.
I thought I told you. That day is Mom's birthday, you know. Can't we make it another day?
Are you kidding me? Sure, a mother's birthday is quite an occasion, but do you really think its importance transcends that of our own wedding? You're seriously thinking about this? I expected a quick push of the button and a quick answer, damn it. Something like, "You're the most important to me, Francis. The one Francis, the only Francis, the almighty angel of love, Francis. Say something!"
But it's an event we celebrate every year, without fail.
Rowan celebrates his mother's birthday extremely grandly every year. One year would be a great, luxurious dinner with her at an expensive traditional restaurant. The next would be an overnight trip to a hotel filled with sightseeing and celebrations. Needless to say, it really did feel a little overboard sometimes, but it was an annual event of great importance. And Mrs. Gilpin, being conservative of her emotions as she is, I could never tell if she was happy on her birthday, with her son showering her with celebratory activities to do together. I'm admittedly being a little rude here, but you'd understand if I thought it wouldn't be so much of a problem if we lay off the celebrations this time, since she never seems to be happy on her birthday anyway, right? Mum's the word, though, if you please. How about we tell Mrs. Gilpin our predicament here and try to convince her to move the celebrations to another day? If we let this day go, we might not be able to reserve anywhere for the wedding, you know? I'll be a grandmother before we ever have that wedding we both wanted.
Mom's birthday? For real?
Looked like Rowan was really reluctant about this, but I somehow managed to convince him that this was the right thing to do, and we successfully reserved the wedding hall for that particular day. And then time flew by like a bullet until the big day finally arrived. We later decided we would only invite family, so I invited my friends and my grandparents, while Rowan invited his mother, his brother, and his wife, and we both sent out invitations to other members of our families to celebrate this momentous occasion of ours with us. There weren't many people for a wedding, so I say wedding, but it was more like a huge family dinner at home. Before the ceremony, Mrs. Gilpin came to greet us. "Oh, Francis, my dear, you look stunning." "What? Oh, thank you so much. I'll see you later." "Oh, of course." Always such seriousness. But at least she complimented me on how I look. That was a compliment, right? I feel kinda great, not gonna lie, lol.
Hello, Miss Francis. Rowan, bro.
You know, most dresses wear brides, but you, Miss Francis, you wear that dress like a goddess. The one Francis, the only Francis, the almighty angel of love, Francis.
Oh, Mr. Aiden, sir, and Miss Dawn. That was the last thing I expected from you, Miss Dawn, I have to admit. This eccentric couple is my brother-in-law, Aiden, and his wife, Dawn. I sometimes meet them at Mrs. Gilpin's house, and they're very kind, respectable folks, and I get along very well with both of them. I doubt your appetite will be satisfied with the monstrous look of mine, not to mention my own, but there will be lots of delicious food tonight, so please help yourselves.
Well then, your wish is my command. I'm gonna eat a lot tonight.
I'm wearing a loose dress because of that very reason. Miss Francis, thank you for this occasion. It's so nice to be invited to share a couple's moment of glory. I eat enough food to kill a horse.
The ceremony started out in this nice manner, and it went on without any problems. However, when it was time for the banquet dinner to start, Rowan went on to say something completely out of the blue, and something that didn't make me happy at all.
I can't do this, Francis. I think I should leave now. It is my mom's birthday today. That's the cold, plain truth.
What?
A banquet is where people just eat and drink to their heart's content, isn't it? It isn't a problem if I'm not here at the banquet, is it?
No. What? Whoa, wait a second. I'm so panicked my mouth can't keep up with my brain.
Mom and I are gonna leave now, the two of us, and we're gonna go celebrate her birthday just like we always do. I'll leave everything to you now, Francis.
You get your ass back here, Rowan. Hey, stop. Come back right now. Rowan never paid any heed to my objection and went on to run to where Mrs. Gilpin sat. As he got close, he seemed to start whispering something to her, asking her to leave with him to celebrate her birthday, no doubt. But then my mother-in-law's perpetually neutral face shifted into an expression that screamed the purest fury the human soul could ever experience. You stupid bastard! Mrs. Gilpin, with such an admirable, graceful form, smacked her son's cheek with a vigor that sent shockwaves across the entire room. My verdict, a slap worthy of a 10 out of 10. This occasion is such a moment of glory for you and Miss Francis, and yet you have the audacity of putting me before your own wife. This is the most ridiculous thing.
Ow! But Mom, you do realize it's a custom of ours that we always celebrate your birthday very well every year, right?
The sudden onset quarrel between mother and son transformed the quaint atmosphere of the banquet into one of cold, brutal awkwardness. But it felt like I shouldn't interfere, and never moved a muscle. In my mind, I was thinking, yes, Mrs. Gilpin, yes! Give him the sense he needs, lol. The birthday of an old geezer like me is not important. I was so happy to see my son finally have that wedding of his that he'd been dreaming of since he was a young boy. Seeing you beside the absolute stunning Francis at their wedding at last was the greatest present anyone could have ever given me. Mrs. Gilpin became emotional beyond all recognition, and then I thought, this is my chance. Talk to her now. I then strode over to her. You'll pay for this, Rowan. Troublebusters, initiate. I'm sorry about this little misunderstanding, everyone. Pay no heed to us, and please help yourselves to the delicious food we've prepared today. Fortunately, my family does things their own way, so my parents and my grandparents gave me the A-OK. You got it, we're gonna eat everything up. Thank you guys. Bless them, for real. Mrs. Gilpin, I'm so sorry this happened on our wedding day of all times. To tell you the truth, I knew today was your birthday, Mrs. Gilpin.
She did. She still had the audacity to set our wedding date for the same day.
There was no audacity at all. Today was the only day they were available. And moreover, Rowan here wanted to make your birthday a higher priority than our wedding. But I went out of my way to convince him we had to set it for today. You see? I'm very sorry. Mrs. Gilpin now bore a look of sadness that made my own heart wrench in all directions. There's absolutely no need for you to apologize, Francis dear. I'm more concerned about how much you two were arguing about something as meaningless as my birthday. I'm sorry, too. Oh, Mrs. Gilpin, I'm sorry you feel sorry. Please, raise your head, dear. You need not do this. I insist you raise your head first, my dear Mrs. Gilpin. I never thought I would have a competition of apologies against Mrs. Gilpin herself, and yet, here we were. The word sorry was literally uttered 1,000 times between the two of us. Rowan, seeing this before his very eyes, went to say,
What did I tell you? We never should have made our wedding day the same as Mom's birthday, just as I thought.
How stupid can a guy get? That's when Mr. Aiden joined the rave.
You're so goddamn stupid, Rowan. Do you really not get it?
He started to scold his younger brother.
But this whole thing never would have happened if we just set our wedding day sometime else when. I don't even know if that's a word, but it should be. That's just it, right there. The reason why we're scolding you so much is because it's always the same with you. Whenever it comes to your wife or your mother, without fail, you always choose your mother. How do you not see this, damn it?
And then Miss Dawn said,
Mr. Rowan, I'm sorry to be so forthcoming here, but it seems to me you're a bit of a mama's boy. In other words, mother complex.
She proved our case even further. Rowan donned an I don't know what I'm doing wrong here expression and seemed to be pretty confused about the whole situation. But after getting lectured by Mrs. Gilpin, Mr. Aiden, and Miss Dawn, it seemed he was finally beginning to understand. In my eyes, this was the present that stood out as the most precious, by far, without question. Seeing you two getting married to each other, my dears, is what every decent mother wants in their memory, and my idiot son did the unthinkable. Mrs. Gilpin was literally in tears. To be honest, I never thought such an indifferent person like her could become so emotional all of a sudden. I feel like I know Mrs. Gilpin on a whole new level now that I've seen her getting emotional. Don't cry, Mrs. Gilpin. There. I'm sorry, Frances dear. I'm sorry. Perhaps her tears did the trick, along with the lecturing session from Mr. Aiden and Miss Dawn. Rowan finally confessed he was wrong in doing what he did.
Frances, I hope you can forgive me. I was so absorbed in Mom's special occasion, I never realized this wedding meant more to you than anything else, and I went about and thought nothing of it. I was also very wrong in trying to leave midway.
It looks like Rowan was genuinely repenting his actions, and his apologies didn't seem superficial at all either. Thanks for the apology, Rowan. I'm only happy you understand more clearly now. I don't want to forget about your mother's birthday. On the contrary, I thought she would love this. Frances, my dear, such is my idiot son. Will you forgive him?
I'm so sorry, Frances. Honey.
Yes, apology accepted. On one condition, that all of you enjoy the banquet through to the end.
Oh, thank goodness.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. The one Frances, the only Frances, the almighty angel of love, Frances. That was the last thing I expected from you, Mrs. Gilpin, I have to admit. To be honest with you, while Rowan apologizing made me happy and relieved indeed, the fact that the same Mrs. Gilpin had taken things to the extreme in terms of emotions and went on to brutally lecture her son about the situation made me so much happier. The backstory was indeed pretty strange, but this day allowed me and Mrs. Gilpin to form a strong connection between ourselves. It is a momentous occasion. How about we go on celebrating my wedding with Rowan and Mrs. Gilpin's birthday together? Everyone, do you think you can toast to Mrs. Gilpin's birthday too?
Hell yeah!
And that's how our wedding banquet became a sudden onset birthday party for Mrs. Gilpin too. But for real though, I'm utterly impressed at how my family had been eating, drinking, and talking during the little mishap that was going on up until a few moments ago. Nothing wrong with that though. Later on during the banquet, Rowan and I, as bride and groom, offered our gratitude to everyone in the form of speeches. And we also went on to personally congratulate Mrs. Gilpin for another wonderful year. All in all, it was pretty chaotic, but it was great fun. The people working at the wedding hall even provided a happy birthday template for the wedding cake, lol. Mrs. Gilpin herself gave a speech saying, I never thought people would celebrate my accomplishments on my son's wedding. This is the best birthday of my entire life. Thank you, everyone, especially to the bride and groom. The memory of her saying those words in tears will stay with me as long as I breathe. After our wedding, our relationship between Rowan and I and with the Gilpins was just awesome.
Frances, Mom asked us to help her out with mowing her lawn next weekend, if that's alright with you.
We do have a date next Saturday, and I have a business trip next week. I'll be leaving on Sunday. Think we can move it to the weekend after that?
Then let's go the weekend after next. I don't think it'll be a problem if we delay the mowing by a couple weeks.
How about this? We buy her a little housewarming gift on Saturday, and we bring it on the weekend after? As you can see, Rowan, who'd always held his mother in his highest priority, became a lot more willing to negotiate. Became pretty flexible, much to my content. And when we did go to her place a couple weeks later, Mrs. Gilpin was a lot more welcoming than she'd been up until the wedding. She'd always been a bit of a bashful woman, but nowadays she smiles a whole lot more and talks with me so much more, in quality, in quantity, and in happy emotions. Rowan, I forbid you from bothering Frances ever again, all right? You're finally mentally separated from parents after all.
I know that already, Mom. No, I feel so embarrassed.
Well, I suppose I should let his own mother pamper him too, from time to time, lol. Ain't that right, Mrs. Gilpin? That is right, Frances, dear. Oh, my lovely son.
Stop it, Mom. You're embarrassing me even more.
This particular incident was not exactly like your usual mother-in-law, daughter-in-law trouble, but it's so nice to know that the wedding helped me feel so much closer to Mrs. Gilpin. Nowadays, actually talking with her had become a lot more common, and visiting Rowan's family's home has become an exciting thing to look forward to these days. Now, if you'll excuse me, I promised I would visit Mrs. Gilpin right now. I'll see you later. Trouble Busters!